The copper kettle hissed as Delilah James lifted it from the stove, her fingers wrapped in damp rags that had long since lost their original color. And she wondered if the $47 hidden beneath her mattress would ever be enough to buy passage to California before her 23rd birthday came and went like all the others. Steam rose in thick clouds around her face as she poured the scalding water into the wooden tub, the third batch this morning, and she had 17 more shirts to scrub before noon. El Paso, Texas in the summer of 1878 was not kind to women who worked with their hands, but Delilah had learned long ago that kindness was a luxury reserved for those born into different circumstances. The boarding house, where she rented a corner room, charged $2 a week, and Mrs. Henderson, who ran the place, expected payment every Sunday without fail or excuses. Her back ached as she bent over the washboard, her auburn hair tied back with a fraying ribbon, and she attacked the mud-caked sleeve of a miner's shirt with the lye soap that left her hands raw and cracked. The dream of California had sustained her through 3 years of this work, ever since her father died and left her with nothing but his debts and a faded photograph of her mother who had passed when Delilah was just a child. California meant orange groves and ocean breezes, or so she had heard from the travelers whose clothes she laundered. It meant a fresh start, where nobody knew her as the laundress with perpetually damp sleeves and soap burns on her wrists. She had calculated that the train ticket would cost $65, plus another $20 for food and lodging during the journey, and perhaps $15 more for the first week, while she found work in San Francisco or Sacramento. That meant she needed $53 more, which at her current rate of saving would take another 8 months if nothing went wrong. Something always went wrong. The door to the laundry shed banged open and Delilah jumped, splashing hot water onto her apron. Margaret, one of the girls who worked at the Silver Spur Saloon, stumbled in with an armful of petticoats and silk stockings that smelled of whiskey and tobacco smoke. "Got a rush order," Margaret said, dropping the clothes onto the table with careless abandon. "Mr. Caldwell is hosting some cattle buyers tomorrow night, and the girls need their best things ready." Delilah wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "That will be extra, Margaret. Rush orders are 50 cents more. Caldwell will pay it. He always does when he is trying to impress someone." Margaret leaned against the doorframe, her painted face showing the wear of too many late nights. "You should come work at the saloon, Delilah. The money is better, and you would not ruin your hands with that awful soap." "I am saving for California," Delilah said, as she always did when this conversation arose. "I need honest work that I can be proud of." Margaret laughed without humor. "Pride does not keep you warm at night, honey, but suit yourself. I will be back tomorrow afternoon for those things." After Margaret left, Delilah added the saloon clothes to her growing pile and returned to her scrubbing with renewed determination. The morning stretched on, the sun climbing higher and turning the laundry shed into an oven that smelled of lye and sweat, and the peculiar dusty scent that permeated everything in El Paso. Around noon, as she was hanging shirts on the line outside, a shadow fell across her work. She turned to find a man standing there, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of the desert sky just before sunset. He wore dusty trail clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and there was something in the way he held himself that suggested he was more comfortable on horseback than standing still. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I am looking for someone who can do laundry. I have been on the trail for 6 weeks, and everything I own needs washing." Delilah wiped her hands on her apron and assessed him with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to judge whether customers could pay. His boots were worn but well made, and the gun belt around his hips was oiled leather with good brass fittings. The horse tied to the post behind him was a fine-looking roan mare with decent tack. "I can help you," she said. "It will cost 30 cents for everything, or 50 if you need it by tomorrow." "Tomorrow is fine." He began unpacking his saddlebags, pulling out shirts and trousers and various other items that were indeed filthy from long weeks on the trail. "Name is Samuel Quinn. I am a cowboy, just brought a herd up from South Texas for Mr. Harrison's ranch outside town." "Delilah James," she said, taking the bundle of clothes from him. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she felt an odd flutter in her chest that she attributed to the heat. "You can collect these tomorrow after 3. Samuel Quinn did not leave immediately. Instead, he watched her sort through his clothes with an expression she could not quite read. "You do good work, the best in El Paso," Delilah said with more confidence than she felt. "I have been doing this for 3 years, and I have never had a complaint. 3 years is a long time to be washing other people's dirt." Something in his tone made her look up sharply, but there was no mockery in his face, only genuine curiosity. "It is honest work and it pays for room and board." "Not everyone has the luxury of choosing their occupation, Mr. Quinn." "Samuel," he corrected. "And I meant no offense. I just think a woman like you deserves better than working yourself to the bone in a laundry shed." Delilah felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the temperature. "You do not know anything about me. I know you have good manners and you speak well, which means you had some education. I know your hands are raw from lye soap, but you keep your apron clean and your hair neat, which means you have pride in yourself. And I know you are saving money for something because there is a careful way you counted out the coins when you quoted me that price, like every penny matters." She stared at him, caught off guard by his perceptiveness. Most customers barely looked at her face, let alone notice details about her character. "I am saving for a train ticket to California," she heard herself say, then immediately wondered why she was sharing this with a stranger. Samuel's expression shifted, something like disappointment flickering across his features. "California is a long way from Texas." "That is the point," Delilah said. "I want to start over somewhere new, somewhere I can be more than just the laundress." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, I hope you get there, Miss James. I truly do. I will see you tomorrow afternoon." She watched him walk back to his horse and ride away down the dusty street, and she told herself the strange feeling in her stomach was just hunger because she had forgotten to eat breakfast again. The rest of the day passed in the usual blur of scrubbing and rinsing and wringing and hanging, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind wandered. She found herself thinking about Samuel Quinn more than was probably appropriate, remembering the way he had really looked at her, not through her the way most people did. She wondered what it was like to ride across open country for 6 weeks, to sleep under stars and wake with the sunrise, to have that kind of freedom. By the time she finished for the day, the sun was setting and her arms felt like lead weights. She counted the day's earnings in her room at the boarding house, adding $3.20 to the small pile beneath her mattress. $50 now, just 35 more to go. She fell asleep that night thinking about orange groves and ocean breezes, but her dreams were filled with desert blue eyes and a voice that said she deserved better. Samuel returned the next afternoon exactly as promised. Delilah had his clothes washed, dried, and neatly folded, each piece smelling of the lavender soap she used for final rinses. She had taken extra care with his shirts, making sure all the stains were removed and the collars were properly starched. "That is fine work," Samuel said, examining a shirt with approval. "My mother could not have done better, and she was particular about laundry." "Was," Delilah asked without thinking, then caught herself. I apologize, that was too personal. No, it is all right. She passed 5 years ago. Fever took her during a bad winter. My father followed her 6 months later. Some people say he died of a broken heart, and I believe them. They were married 30 years, and I never once heard them exchange a harsh word. Delilah felt a pang of sympathy. I am sorry for your loss. That must have been difficult. It was, but I am grateful I got to see what a good marriage looks like. Makes a man want the same for himself someday. He paid her the 50 cents and then added an extra quarter. For the extra care you took. That is not necessary, Delilah protested, but he closed her fingers around the coins. Quality work deserves quality pay. My mother taught me that too. He hesitated, shifting his weight like a man about to do something that made him nervous. Miss James, would you allow me to buy you supper this evening? There is a decent restaurant on Rio Grande Street that serves a good steak. Delilah's heart jumped into her throat. She could not remember the last time a man had asked her to supper, and certainly not a man like Samuel Quinn who looked at her like she was worth noticing. But she also knew that getting attached to anyone in El Paso was foolish when she was planning to leave. I do not think that would be wise, she said carefully. I am not looking for complications. Neither am I, Samuel said. I am just looking for good company over a meal. You work hard, Miss James. You deserve an hour where someone else does the cooking. The temptation was too strong to resist. She was tired of eating bread and cheese alone in her room, tired of having no one to talk to except customers who barely saw her as human. All right, she heard herself say, but only if you let me pay for my own meal. I do not want you to think I am the kind of woman who accepts charity. His face broke into a smile that transformed his whole appearance, making him look younger and less weathered. Fair enough. I will meet you there at 6, she nodded, already wondering what she had gotten herself into. That evening, Delilah put on her one good dress, a simple blue cotton that she had made herself from fabric purchased at the general store. It was nothing fancy, but it was clean and properly fitted, and when she looked at herself in the small mirror above her wash basin, she thought she looked almost pretty with her hair down and her face scrubbed free of the day's grime. The restaurant was modest but respectable, with checkered tablecloths and kerosene lamps that cast a warm glow. Samuel stood when she entered, and she noticed he had cleaned up too, his hair still damp from washing and his shirt freshly pressed. The shirt she had laundered, she realized with a small smile. They ordered steak and potatoes and green beans, and for the first few minutes they ate in slightly awkward silence. Then Samuel asked her about how she had ended up in El Paso, and Delilah found herself telling him about her father's death, and the debts she had discovered, and the decision to leave Kansas City behind. I thought about going back east, she said, cutting her steak into precise pieces. Boston or Philadelphia, maybe. But everyone says the real opportunities are in California now. They say it is like the whole world is starting fresh out there. I have been to California, Samuel said. Drove a herd up to Sacramento 2 years ago. It is beautiful country, I will give you that. Big trees and green hills, nothing like Texas. But it is crowded too, full of people all chasing the same dreams. Sometimes I think the chase matters more to them than actually catching anything. Delilah set down her fork. You are trying to discourage me. No, I am trying to be honest with you. California is not the paradise people make it out to be. It is just another place with different problems. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. But if you are determined to go, you should go. A woman should follow her own path, not let fear or other people's opinions stop her. What about you? Delilah asked. What path are you following? Samuel considered this, turning his coffee cup in his hands. I have been drifting since my parents died, hiring on with different ranches, never staying long in one place. I suppose I have been looking for something without knowing what it is. Home, maybe. Purpose. A reason to put down roots instead of just blowing around like tumbleweed. They talked until the restaurant owner began giving them pointed looks, and they realized they were the last customers remaining. Samuel walked her back to the boarding house through streets lit by moonlight and the occasional window glow, and Delilah could not remember the last time she had enjoyed an evening so much. At the door to the boarding house, Samuel touched his hat brim again in that courteous way of his. "Thank you for the company, Miss James. I know you said you were not looking for complications, but I hope I might see you again before I move on." "Where are you going next?" Delilah asked, surprised by the disappointment she felt. "Not sure yet. Mr. Harrison offered me steady work at his ranch, but I have not decided if I am ready to settle. Part of me thinks I should keep moving, but another part is starting to wonder what I am running from." He smiled in the darkness. "You have a gift for making a man philosophical, Delilah James." She liked the way he said her name, with care and respect. "I work at the laundry shed every day except Sunday. If you want to talk more philosophy, you know where to find me." "I will remember that." She watched him walk away into the night, and when she climbed the stairs to her room, she noticed her hidden money but did not count it. For the first time in 3 years, California seemed very far away, and she was not entirely sure how she felt about that. Samuel began appearing at the laundry shed with remarkable regularity over the following weeks. Sometimes he brought laundry, sometimes he brought lunch, and sometimes he just brought himself and conversation while she worked. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in South Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the summer he and his father drove cattle to Missouri and nearly lost everything in a flash flood. Delilah told him about her mother's death when she was 8, about how her father had tried his best but never quite recovered from losing his wife. She told him about the small house in Kansas City and the piano lessons she had taken before money got tight, about the dreams she had once had of becoming a teacher. "You still could," Samuel said one afternoon while she scrubbed mud from a cowhand's trousers. "Be a teacher, I mean. California has schools." "I am 23 years old with no formal education past the 8th grade," Delilah said. "Schools want young women with certificates and recommendations, not laundresses with work-roughened hands." "Your hands do not define you," Samuel said quietly. "And anyone who thinks otherwise is a fool." She looked up from her washing and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. They had been dancing around something for weeks now, both of them feeling the pull but neither quite willing to name it. "Samuel," she started, but he held up a hand. "I know, you are saving for California. You have your plans and I should not interfere with them." He stood, preparing to leave. "But Delilah, I need you to know something. I have been offered that job at the Harrison Ranch permanently. Good pay, my own cabin, a chance to build something lasting. I told Mr. Harrison I would give him an answer by the end of the month." "What does that have to do with me?" Delilah asked, though her heart was pounding because she suspected she knew exactly what it had to do with her. "Everything," Samuel said simply. "It has everything to do with you, because I am falling in love with you, and I cannot make a decision about my future without knowing if you might possibly be part of it." The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Delilah's hands were frozen in the washwater, her mind racing. This was not part of her plan. California was part of her plan. A fresh start where no one knew her history was part of her plan. Falling in love with a cowboy in El Paso, Texas, was decidedly not part of any plan she had ever made. "I cannot ask you to give up California," Samuel continued when she did not respond. But I can offer you an alternative. Marry me, Delilah. Let me take you west as my wife. Not to California, maybe, but to someplace new where we can build a life together. The Montana Territory is opening up, big ranches looking for experienced hands, good land for homesteading. Or we could go to Colorado. I have heard there are opportunities around Denver. Anywhere you want to go, I will take you there. You will never have to wash another person's laundry again unless you want to. You will have a home and a partner and a future that is about more than just running away. Delilah pulled her hands from the water, hardly noticing the soap dripping onto the floor. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you are kind even when you are tired, honest even when it would be easier to lie. I know you dream of something better, and you are willing to do whatever it takes to get there. I know when I am with you, I do not feel like I am drifting anymore. I feel like I have found what I have been looking for. He took a step closer. And I think you feel it too, even if you are scared to admit it. She wanted to deny it, but the words would not come because he was right. She had felt it from that first afternoon when he noticed her in a way no one else ever had, and it had been growing stronger every day since. But loving him meant giving up the dream she had held onto through 3 years of backbreaking work, and she did not know if she was brave enough to trade one uncertain future for another. I need time to think, she whispered. Take all the time you need, Samuel said. I will be at the Harrison Ranch. Send word when you have decided. After he left, Delilah sat down on the floor of the laundry shed and cried for the first time in years. She cried for the confusion and the fear and the terrible hope that was blooming in her chest, despite all her careful plans. She cried because she was 23 years old and tired of being alone, and because Samuel Quinn offered her something she had not realized. She wanted more than California. That night, she pulled out the money from beneath her mattress and counted it. $53 now, after weeks of careful saving. She thought about what that money could buy. A train ticket to San Francisco, and a few weeks of room and board while she looked for work as a laundress in a different city, doing the same backbreaking labor she did here, but without anyone she cared about nearby. Or she could use it as a stake for a new life with Samuel, wherever they decided to go. 2 people could go further on $53 than one person could alone. The choice should have been simple, but nothing felt simple anymore. Sunday came, her one day off, and Delilah walked through El Paso's dusty streets trying to clear her head. She passed the train station and stood looking at the board that listed destinations and prices. San Francisco, $65. Sacramento, $63. Los Angeles, $58. All of them just names of places she had never been, cities full of strangers who would not care whether she lived or died. She thought about Samuel's parents, married 30 years without a harsh word between them. She thought about dying of a broken heart because you could not imagine life without your partner. She thought about what it would be like to have someone who saw her as more than just a pair of hands that did laundry, someone who believed she deserved better and was willing to help her get it. The decision crystallized in her mind with sudden clarity. California had always been about running away from something, but Samuel offered her the chance to run toward something instead. Toward a partnership, toward love, toward a future that was uncertain but not lonely. She turned away from the train station and walked toward the edge of town, where the Harrison Ranch lay sprawled across the dusty landscape. It was a 3-mile walk in the Sunday heat, but she barely noticed the discomfort. Her heart was pounding, and her palms were sweating, and she felt more alive than she had in years. The ranch house was a low, adobe structure surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Cowboys lounged in the shade of the bunkhouse, and someone was working with a young horse in the main corral. Delilah asked the first man she saw where she might find Samuel Quinn, and he pointed toward a small cabin set back from the main buildings. Samuel was sitting on the porch of the cabin, mending a bridle, and he looked up in surprise when Delilah came walking across the yard. He stood quickly, dropping the leather and crossing to meet her. "Delilah, what are you doing here?" "I have been thinking about what you said," she told him, slightly breathless from the walk and her own nervousness. "About going west together, about building something new." And his face was carefully neutral, but she could see hope and fear warring in his eyes. "And I think you are right. I have been so focused on running away from my past that I forgot to think about what I might be running toward. California was just a place on a map, but you are real. What you are offering is real." She took a deep breath. "So yes, Samuel Quinn, I will marry you and let you take me west as your wife, and we will build a life together wherever we end up." The transformation in his expression was remarkable, joy breaking across his face like sunrise. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, and when he set her down, he kissed her for the first time, and it felt like coming home to a place she had never been. "You will not regret this," he said against her hair. "I swear to you, Delilah, I will spend every day trying to give you the life you deserve." "I do not need you to give me anything," she said. "I just need you to be my partner. We build it together or not at all." "Together," he agreed and kissed her again to seal the promise. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the El Paso courthouse, with Mr. Harrison and his wife standing as witnesses. Delilah wore a new dress that she made from cream-colored muslin, and Samuel bought a new hat for the occasion. She felt a pang when she handed in notice at the laundry shed, but it was overshadowed by excitement for what came next. Samuel had accepted a position as foreman at a ranch outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming territory. The owner, a man named Robert Sinclair, was building up a cattle operation and needed experienced men to help manage it. The pay was good, and Samuel would have a percentage of the profits, a real stake in something permanent. They would leave in 2 weeks, giving them time to prepare for the journey and say their goodbyes. The night before they left El Paso, Delilah stood in her room at the boarding house and looked at the space that had been her whole world for 3 years. The bed with its thin mattress, the wash basin and pitcher, the single chair and the trunk that held all her possessions. She had been so desperate to leave this place, but now that the moment had arrived, she felt unexpectedly sentimental. "You all right?" Samuel asked from the doorway. They would spend this last night apart, a concession to propriety that neither of them particularly cared about but that Mrs. Henderson had insisted upon. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Delilah said. 3 months ago, I was counting coins and dreaming about California. Now I am married and heading to Wyoming, and I cannot quite believe it is real. Having second thoughts." There was vulnerability in his voice, a fear that she might still change her mind. "No," she said firmly. "No second thoughts, just amazement at how life can turn on a single moment. If you had not needed your laundry done, if you had chosen a different day or a different laundress, none of this would have happened." Samuel crossed the room and took her hands. "I do not believe in fate exactly, but I believe some things are meant to be. I think I was meant to find you, Delilah. And I think we are meant to build something good together, wherever we end up." They left El Paso on a bright September morning in 1878, their belongings packed on 2 horses with Samuel's roan mare and a gentle sorrel gelding he had bought for Delilah. The journey to Cheyenne would take 3 weeks, maybe 4, and Delilah felt a thrill of adventure as they rode out of town with the sun at their backs. The landscape changed as they traveled north, the harsh desert of Texas giving way to rolling plains and then to the foothills of the Rockies. They camped under stars so bright, and numerous that Delilah felt she could reach up and touch them. Samuel taught her to make coffee over a campfire and how to read the weather in the evening clouds. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms and preferences and quirks. They also learned each other in more intimate ways, and Delilah discovered that physical love was nothing like the vague and slightly embarrassing descriptions she had heard. With Samuel, it was natural and tender and sometimes awkwardly funny, two people figuring out how to fit together in every possible way. "Happy?" Samuel asked one night as they lay wrapped in blankets under a vast Wyoming sky. "Happier than I have ever been," Delilah said honestly. "Even though we are sleeping on the ground and I have not had a proper bath in a week, and tomorrow we have to cross that river that looks terrifyingly fast." He laughed and pulled her closer. "We will cross the river just fine, and Cheyenne has a hotel with a real bathtub. First thing we do when we arrive, I am getting you that bath. First thing we do is find this ranch and make sure we actually have jobs waiting," Delilah corrected, but she smiled as she said it. They reached Cheyenne in late September as the aspens were turning gold on the mountainsides. The town was bigger than El Paso, more developed, with actual sidewalks and gas streetlights and a train depot that bustled with activity. The ranch, the Sinclair Cattle Company, was 20 miles north of town in a valley where grass grew thick and a clear creek provided year-round water. Robert Sinclair was a barrel-chested man in his 50s with a firm handshake and direct manner of speaking. "Samuel, good to see you made it, and this must be your bride. Welcome to Wyoming, Mrs. Quinn. Your husband has told me you are a hard worker, so if you are interested, my wife could use help managing the household. We have 3 children and we are trying to make this place civilized, which is harder than it sounds when you are surrounded by cowboys." Delilah glanced at Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. "I would be happy to help," she said. "Though I should tell you my experience is primarily with laundry. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, managing supplies. It all needs doing and I can pay you fair wages for your time. Sarah, my wife, has been trying to do it all herself, and I am worried she is going to collapse from exhaustion." Sinclair led them toward a large log house that dominated the ranch compound. "You too will have the foreman's cabin. It is not much, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it is solid and has a good stove." The cabin was indeed small, but it was clean and well built, with glass windows and a stone fireplace and a bedroom separate from the main living space. To Delilah, who had spent 3 years in a boarding house corner room, it felt like a palace. "Our own home," she said wonderingly, running her hand along the smooth log walls. "Our first home," Samuel corrected. "We will have better someday, I promise. A real house with multiple rooms and a porch that wraps around." "I do not need better," Delilah said. "I just need you and 4 walls and a door I can close against the world. This is perfect." They spent the next few days settling in and learning the rhythms of the ranch. Samuel threw himself into his work with characteristic dedication, managing the cowboys, organizing the cattle operations, planning for the winter ahead. Delilah began working with Sarah Sinclair, a capable woman near her own age, who was indeed overwhelmed by the demands of running a household in the Wyoming wilderness. "I am so grateful for your help," Sarah said as they worked together in the ranch house kitchen, preparing supper for the family and the hands. "Robert means well, but he does not understand that I cannot cook for 20 people, manage 3 children, and keep this house clean all by myself." When he said Samuel was bringing a wife, I nearly cried with relief. "I am happy to help," Delilah said, kneading bread dough with practiced efficiency. "And truthfully, I am glad to have work that contributes something." I do not want to be just a decorative wife who sits idle while Samuel works himself to exhaustion. You two seem well matched, Sarah observed. How long have you been married? Just over a month. We met in El Paso, in Texas, where I was working as a laundress. I was saving money to go to California when Samuel came to have his clothes cleaned, and somehow I ended up here instead. Delilah smiled at the memory. It was not part of my plan at all, but I think it might be better than anything I could have planned. Love usually is, Sarah said. Robert and I met in Ohio, married after knowing each other 6 weeks, and came out here with nothing but ambition and stubbornness. Some days I wonder what I was thinking, leaving civilization for this wild country. But then I look at what we are building and I feel proud. We are making something from nothing, creating a legacy for our children. That matters more than easy living. As autumn deepened into winter, Delilah fell into a routine that was exhausting but satisfying. She worked alongside Sarah during the days, helping with cooking, cleaning, laundry for the household, and managing supplies. The work was not so different from what she had done in El Paso, but the context was entirely different. She was not scrubbing clothes to save pennies for a distant dream. She was helping to build a functioning household, contributing to a community, working alongside people she cared about. Evenings were spent in the cabin with Samuel, cooking simple suppers and sitting by the fire while he talked about his day, and she talked about hers. They played cards and read books borrowed from the Sinclair Library and made plans for the future. Samuel wanted to eventually have his own ranch, a small operation that they could build together. Delilah wanted a garden in the spring and maybe some chickens, a few practical things that would make their cabin feel more like a permanent home. Winter in Wyoming was harsh in ways that Texas never was. Snow fell in quantities Delilah had never imagined, drifts piling high against the cabin walls and turning the landscape into an endless expanse of white. The temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid in the pitcher overnight. But the cabin stayed warm, Samuel kept the firewood stocked, and there was something cozy about being snowed in together with nowhere to go and nothing to do but enjoy each other's company. You miss Texas? Delilah asked one evening as they sat wrapped in quilts, watching snow fall past the window. Not even a little bit, Samuel said. Texas was where I was drifting. Wyoming is where I am building. There is a difference. You miss California, he asked her, the dream you gave up to come here. Delilah considered this carefully. I miss the idea of it sometimes. The orange groves and ocean breezes, the sense that I would be starting completely fresh. But I realize now that I was not really running toward California. I was running away from being alone and powerless and stuck. And I am none of those things anymore, so California would be redundant. Redundant, Samuel repeated with a laugh. Is that what I am? A California substitute? You are so much better than California, Delilah said seriously. California was going to be me alone in a new place, still washing laundry, still struggling. This is me building a life with someone I love, doing work that matters, being part of something bigger than myself. There is no comparison. He kissed her then, tenderly, and said, I love you, Delilah Quinn. I love that you are practical and honest and you say what you mean. I love that you work as hard as I do and you never complain even when things are difficult. I love that you gave up your dream because you found a better one. I love you too, she said. And I am grateful every day that you needed your laundry done. Christmas came and the Sinclairs hosted a gathering for all the ranch hands and their families. Someone produced a fiddle and there was dancing in the barn, with lanterns strung from the rafters and a fire burning in a metal drum for warmth. Delilah danced with Samuel and laughed more than she had since childhood, and she felt surrounded by community in a way she never had before. In January, Delilah realized her monthly courses had not come, and she felt a flutter of nausea in the mornings. She waited another week to be sure, then told Samuel one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "A baby," he said, the word seeming to stick in his throat. "You are going to have a baby. In August, I think. Are you happy?" He crossed the cabin in 2 strides and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around like he had the day she agreed to marry him. "Happy, Delilah, I am ecstatic. We are going to be parents. We are going to have a family." "We already are a family," Delilah said, laughing at his enthusiasm. "But yes, we are going to be a bigger family. I hope you are prepared for sleepless nights and dirty diapers and all the chaos that comes with a baby." "I am prepared for anything as long as I am facing it with you," Samuel said, and she believed him because he had proven it true every day since they met. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, despite the hard work and the harsh climate. Sarah Sinclair, who had 3 children of her own, proved to be an invaluable source of advice and support. As spring arrived and the snow melted, revealing brown grass that quickly turned green, Delilah felt her body changing and marveled at the life growing inside her. Samuel became even more protective, insisting she not lift heavy things and checking on her constantly to make sure she was not overdoing it. It was sweet, but occasionally suffocating, and they had their first real argument when he suggested she stop working entirely until after the baby came. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Delilah said sharply. "Women have been having babies and working right up until delivery since the beginning of time. I will not sit idle for 6 months just because you are nervous." "I am not nervous, I am cautious," Samuel countered. "And I do not think it is unreasonable to want my wife to take care of herself and our child. Taking care of myself does not mean stopping everything I do. It means being sensible, which I have always been. I am not going to lift water barrels or chop wood, but I can certainly help Sarah with cooking and sewing and light tasks." They compromised, with Delilah reducing her hours but not stopping entirely, and Samuel grudgingly admitting that she knew her own limits better than he did. It was their first real test as a couple, learning to navigate disagreement without damaging the love between them, and they came through it stronger. As spring turned to summer, the ranch bustled with activity. Calves were born and branded, fences were repaired, and preparations began for the fall cattle drive to market. Samuel was busier than ever, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark, but he always made time to check on Delilah and feel the baby kick. "Strong," he said one evening with his hand on her swollen belly. "Just like his mother, or her," Delilah corrected. "Do not assume just because you want a son. I do not care if it is a boy or girl as long as everyone comes through healthy. Though I will admit, the idea of a daughter who looks like you makes my heart hurt in the best way. A son who has your kindness and work ethic would be equally wonderful," Delilah said. "But truly, I just want a healthy baby and to survive the delivery without complications." She tried not to dwell on the risks of childbirth, but they were impossible to ignore entirely. She had known too many women who died bringing life into the world, and she sometimes lay awake at night wondering if she would be one of them. But Sarah reassured her that she was young and healthy and strong, and that most births went smoothly despite the horror stories everyone seemed eager to share. In mid-August, on a hot afternoon when the sky was so blue, it hurt to look at, Delilah's labor began. Sarah sent one of the hands to fetch Samuel from the far pasture, while she helped Delilah to the bedroom in the Sinclair house, which was more comfortable and better equipped than the cabin. The labor was long and painful and terrifying in a way nothing else in Delilah's life had been. But Sarah stayed with her the whole time, coaching and encouraging, and Samuel held her hand and told her she was the bravest person he had ever known. Just after sunset, as the sky turned from blue to pink to purple, Delilah gave birth to a son who announced his arrival with a lusty cry that made everyone laugh with relief. "He is perfect," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion as he held his son for the first time. "Delilah, he is absolutely perfect." Delilah, exhausted but elated, watched her husband cradle their baby with infinite tenderness, and she felt her heart expand to accommodate this new, overwhelming love. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son's red face and dark hair, Samuel said, "Thomas, after my father. Thomas James Quinn, if that is all right with you." "Thomas James Quinn," Delilah repeated, testing how it sounded. "I like it. Your father would be proud." The weeks after Thomas's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings and the steep learning curve that came with first-time parenthood. Samuel proved to be a devoted father, taking night shifts with the baby so Delilah could rest, changing diapers without complaint, and walking the floor for hours when Thomas would not settle. "You are a natural," Delilah told him one morning as she watched him rock their son back to sleep. "I have no idea what I am doing," Samuel admitted. "I am just trying not to break him." "Well, you are succeeding admirably, and Thomas clearly adores you already." As autumn arrived and Thomas grew from a tiny newborn into a more substantial baby, Delilah reflected on how much her life had changed in just over a year. 15 months ago, she had been a lonely laundress in El Paso, scrubbing other people's dirt and dreaming of escape. Now she was a wife and mother in Wyoming territory, building a life that was richer and more fulfilling than anything she had imagined in those California dreams. Samuel was equally transformed. The restless drifter who had walked into her laundry shed had become a settled family man with purpose and direction. He talked constantly about the future, about the ranch he wanted to build, about the life he wanted to give Delilah and Thomas. He was saving money from his foreman's salary and the percentage of ranch profits, planning for the day when they could buy their own land. 5 more years, he told Delilah one evening as they sat on their cabin porch watching Thomas play with a wooden horse Samuel had carved. 5 more years of saving and learning, and we will have enough to start our own operation. Not huge, maybe 200 head to start, but it will be ours. I do not need my own ranch, Delilah said. I am happy here doing what we are doing. But I want to give you more than a foreman's cabin, Samuel insisted. I want you to have the security of owning something, of knowing that no one can take it away. I want Thomas to grow up on land that belongs to him. Delilah understood this drive, even if she did not entirely share it. Samuel had lost everything when his parents died, and he was determined to build something that would last, a legacy that could not be stolen by fever or debt or bad luck. She respected that ambition even as she tried to make him understand that she already had everything she needed in him and Thomas. They compromised, as they always did. They would continue working for the Sinclairs while saving aggressively, and when the right opportunity came, they would take it. But they would not sacrifice their present happiness for future security, would not work themselves to death chasing a dream that was always 5 years away. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Thomas grew into a cheerful toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. Delilah continued working with Sarah Sinclair, now as much friend as employer, and she began teaching some of the ranch children their letters and numbers, discovering that she enjoyed education as much as she had thought she would. "You are good at this," Sarah observed one afternoon as Delilah worked with 6 children of various ages in the ranch house parlor. "Have you considered starting an actual school?" I am not qualified to run a school, Delilah protested. I only went through 8th grade myself, which is more education than most people in Wyoming territory have. And you clearly have the patience and skill for teaching. Think about it. The nearest school is in Cheyenne, which is too far for daily travel. If you started a school here at the ranch, you would be providing a real service. The idea took root in Delilah's mind. A school would give her purpose beyond household management, would allow her to use her mind in ways that washing laundry never had. She discussed it with Samuel that evening, expecting him to be cautious about her taking on more responsibility, but instead he was enthusiastic. "You should do it," he said firmly. "You have wanted to teach since before I met you. This is your chance." "But Thomas is still so young, and I am already helping Sarah with household management, and I would need supplies and books and a proper space." "We will figure it out," Samuel said. "We always do. I will talk to Mr. Sinclair about using one of the storage buildings for a schoolroom. You make a list of what you need, and I will see about ordering books from Cheyenne. And Sarah can help with Thomas during school hours, or we can bring him along. There is always a solution, Delilah. You just have to be willing to look for it." By spring of 1881, the Sinclair Ranch School was in operation with 12 students ranging in age from 5 to 14. Delilah taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography in a converted storage building that Samuel and the ranch hands had transformed into a surprisingly cozy classroom. It was not fancy, but it had desks and books and a blackboard, and the children were eager to learn. "I never thought I would end up here," Delilah told Sarah one afternoon as they watched the children stream out of the schoolhouse at the end of the day. "Teaching ranch children in Wyoming territory. It is so far from everything I thought my life would be." "Is it better or worse than you expected?" Sarah asked. "Better," Delilah said without hesitation. "So much better. I thought California would give me freedom and opportunity, but this gives me purpose. These children need education, and I can provide it. That matters more than orange groves or ocean breezes." In the summer of 1882, Samuel came home with news that Robert Sinclair was willing to sell them 300 acres of ranch land at a favorable price. It is the north section, where the creek runs through. Good grass, water year-round, enough space to run a decent herd. He says if we can come up with $800, he will carry the rest on credit at reasonable terms. Delilah felt her heart race. $800 was an enormous sum, but they had been saving diligently for 4 years. "How much do we have?" $712. "We are close, Delilah. We are so close." They scraped together the remaining money by selling the sorrel gelding that Delilah rarely rode anymore and taking extra work. Samuel breaking horses for neighboring ranches and Delilah taking in sewing and mending. By September, they had $840 and they went to Robert Sinclair to make the deal. "You two have been good people to work with," Sinclair said as they signed the papers. "I have no doubt you will make a success of this, and I am glad you are staying nearby. Sarah would be lost without Delilah, and I would be lost without Samuel's good sense." "We will still work for you," Samuel assured him. "At least until we get our own operation profitable. I am not going to leave you short-handed. I know you will not. That is why I am confident this arrangement will work for everyone." They celebrated that night in their cabin, with Thomas asleep in the loft and a special supper of chicken and potatoes that Delilah had cooked. "We own land," Samuel said wonderingly, 300 acres of our own. "This is real, Delilah. We are really doing this." "We are really doing this," she agreed, and she felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with escaping her past and everything to do with building her future. Over the next year, they began developing their own ranch while continuing to work for the Sinclairs. Samuel spent his free time building a small herd, buying cattle at favorable prices and grazing them on their land. Delilah continued teaching and helped with planning and bookkeeping, her head for numbers proving invaluable. In the spring of 1883, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. Thomas was now 4 years old and excited about the prospect of a sibling, though he did not entirely understand what it meant. "Will the baby sleep in my bed?" he asked. "No, the baby will have a cradle in our room at first," Delilah explained. "But when the baby is bigger, you can help teach him or her things, like how to walk and talk." "I will be a good big brother," Thomas declared with the seriousness of a 4-year-old, and Delilah hugged him close, grateful for this earnest, loving child. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Delilah knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was not working quite as hard. Sarah insisted she take time to rest, and the older ranch children helped watch Thomas when Delilah needed to nap. The baby, a daughter they named Martha after Samuel's mother, arrived in November of 1883 during an early snowstorm. The birth was quick and relatively uncomplicated, and Samuel cried when he held his daughter for the first time, this tiny girl with rosebud lips and a shock of dark hair. "She looks like you," Delilah said, exhausted but content. "She looks like perfection," Samuel said. Just like her mother, with 2 children and a developing ranch and the school to manage, life became more complicated but also richer. Thomas adored his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from changing diapers to singing lullabies. Samuel somehow found time to be present for his family while building up their cattle operation and still working as foreman for Sinclair. By 1885, the Quinn Ranch was profitable enough that Samuel could afford to quit his foreman position and focus on their own operation full-time. They had 200 head of cattle, 3 horses, a small chicken coop, and plans to build a proper house to replace the cabin they had outgrown. "I promised you a house with multiple rooms and a wrap-around porch," Samuel said as they stood on their land, looking at the spot where they planned to build. "It is time I made good on that promise." "You have already given me everything I need," Delilah said. "But I will not say no to more space. Thomas and Martha are getting bigger, and the cabin is feeling rather cramped." They built the house themselves with help from friends and neighbors, a community barn raising that reminded Delilah of how far they had come from those early days in El Paso. The house was modest by some standards but grand by theirs, with 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a parlor with a fireplace, and yes, a porch that wrapped around 3 sides where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over the mountains. The school moved too, relocated to a new building on their property that Samuel built specifically for that purpose. It was larger than the storage building at the Sinclair Ranch, with better light and heat, and Delilah now taught 23 students from all over the valley. "You are making a real difference here," Samuel told her one evening as they sat on their new porch, watching Thomas and Martha play in the yard while the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. "These children would have no education at all without you." "I am doing what I love," Delilah said simply. "That is its own reward. Do you ever think about California anymore, about what might have been if you had stuck with that plan?" Delilah considered this. "Sometimes, but only in an abstract way. Like wondering about a book I did not read or a path I did not take. I cannot imagine my life without you and the children, without this community we have built. California might have been an adventure, but this is a life. There is a difference." "A life," Samuel repeated. "I like that. This is our life, the one we chose and built together. Every hard day, every challenge, every small victory, it is all ours." As the years passed, their life continued to grow and evolve. They had another child in 1887, a son they named Peter, and their final child, another daughter named Caroline, in 1890. The ranch prospered as cattle prices improved and they gained a reputation for quality stock. Delilah's school became an institution in the valley, educating 36 children at its peak and sending several students on to universities back east. Thomas grew into a young man who loved ranching as much as his father did, and he began managing more and more of the operation as Samuel's hair turned gray and his joints grew stiff from years of hard work. Martha inherited her mother's love of teaching and began helping in the school when she was only 12, showing remarkable patience and skill with the younger children. Peter was the dreamer, always reading books and talking about far-off places, and Caroline was the diplomat who could make peace between siblings with a smile and a well-chosen word. "We have done well," Samuel said one evening in 1895 as they sat on their porch, now weathered by 17 years of Wyoming weather. Their children were inside, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting out through the open windows. "Look at what we have built, Delilah. A family, a ranch, a school, a legacy." "We have done very well," Delilah agreed, reaching for his hand. "And to think it all started because you needed your laundry done." "Best dirty shirts I ever had," Samuel said with a laugh. "If I had known what would come from asking you to wash them, I would have gotten them even dirtier." Delilah laughed too, remembering that younger version of herself who had been so determined to escape to California, who had thought salvation lay in geographical distance rather than human connection. "I was saving for a ticket west," she said softly. "And you said you would take me there as your wife. You kept your promise, Samuel Quinn. You took me west and gave me a life better than any I could have imagined." "We gave each other a life," Samuel corrected. "I was drifting before I met you, looking for something without knowing what it was. You gave me purpose and love and a reason to put down roots. Everything good in my life started the day I walked into that laundry shed." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the stars emerged, and Delilah thought about the long, improbable journey that had brought them here. From a laundry shed in El Paso to a thriving ranch in Wyoming. From a woman alone with desperate dreams to a wife and mother and teacher with a family and community that depended on her. She had never made it to California, had never seen the orange groves or ocean breezes she once dreamed about. But she had found something better. She had found love and partnership and purpose, had built a life that mattered, had raised children who would carry forward the values she and Samuel had tried to instill. The dream had changed, but the reality was better than any dream could have been. In 1898, Thomas married a girl from a neighboring ranch and brought her home to work the Quinn land with him. They built their own house on the property and began having children, giving Samuel and Delilah their first grandchildren. Martha went back east to attend a teaching college and returned with modern ideas about education that she began implementing in the school. Peter shocked everyone by announcing he wanted to study law and went to Denver to apprentice with an attorney. Caroline, at only 8 years old, declared she wanted to be a doctor, and neither Delilah nor Samuel doubted she would find a way to make it happen. "Our children are going to change the world," Delilah said one evening as she and Samuel discussed Peter's letters from Denver. "They already have changed our world," Samuel pointed out. "And they are doing it because you and I showed them what was possible. We took risks, we worked hard, we built something from nothing. They saw that and learned from it." As the new century dawned, Samuel and Delilah found themselves entering their 60s, still active but slowing down, letting Thomas and Martha take on more responsibility for the ranch and school. They spent more time on their porch, watching grandchildren play in the yard, discussing politics and weather, and the small details of daily life that make up a marriage. "Any regrets?" Samuel asked her one afternoon in the spring of 1902. They were both 67 years old now, married 24 years, partners in every sense of the word. "Not one," Delilah said firmly. "You. Only that I did not meet you sooner. I would have liked more years with you, but I am grateful for every single day we have had." "We still have years ahead of us," Delilah said. "Do not start talking like we are at the end." "Not the end," Samuel agreed. "Just a different chapter, the one where we get to enjoy what we built instead of constantly working to build it." They did have years ahead of them, good years filled with grandchildren and community, and the satisfaction of looking back on a life well lived. Samuel made it to 73 before a sudden heart attack took him on a clear October morning in 1908. He died in Delilah's arms in their bed in the house they had built together, and his last words were, "Thank you for giving me everything." Delilah mourned him deeply, but not desperately. She had loved him for 3 decades and been loved fully in return, and that was more than many people ever got. She wore black for a year, and then put it aside because Samuel would not have wanted her to spend her remaining time drowning in grief. She continued teaching until she was 75, finally retiring when her eyesight began to fail, and she could no longer read the textbooks. Thomas and his wife ran the ranch with their 4 children, and Martha had taken over the school completely, implementing modern teaching methods that would have amazed the students of earlier years. Delilah lived to see Peter become a judge in Denver and Caroline graduate from medical school, one of only a handful of women in her class. She lived to see 15 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren, to see the ranch grow to 3,000 acres, to see the school educate its 500th student. She died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1921 at the age of 86, in the bed where she had slept beside Samuel for so many years. They buried her next to him on a hill overlooking their land with a simple stone that read, "Delilah James Quinn, 1855–1921, beloved wife, mother, teacher." At her funeral, Thomas stood to speak about his mother. "She used to tell us about how she was saving for a ticket to California when she met our father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "How he offered to take her west as his wife, and she gave up California for Wyoming. She always said it was the best decision she ever made. Looking around at all of you, at this community she helped build, at this family she raised, at the lives she touched through her teaching, I think we can all agree she was right. She never made it to California, but she made it to somewhere better. She made it home." The people gathered there, 3 generations of students and friends and family, nodded in agreement. Delilah James Quinn had indeed made it home, and in doing so, she had helped countless others find their homes too. She had started as a laundress saving coins in a dusty Texas town, dreaming of escape, and she had ended as the matriarch of a ranching family and the founder of a school that educated children for 40 years. It was not the life she had planned, but it was the life she had lived, and it was extraordinary. The Quinn Ranch continued for generations, and the school that Delilah founded eventually became part of the county school system, educating children well into the 20th century. Her descendants spread across Wyoming and beyond, carrying with them the values she and Samuel had instilled: hard work, integrity, kindness, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. In the end, Delilah's story was not about the destination she had planned, but about the journey she actually took. It was about finding love in a laundry shed, about trading one dream for a better one, about building a life that mattered from the foundation of partnership and mutual respect. It was about a cowboy who saw worth in a laundress, and a laundress who saw possibility in a cowboy, and the beautiful life they created together in the wild, wide open spaces of the American West. And every time their descendants gathered on that porch that wrapped around the house Samuel built, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed the Quinn family story unfold, they remembered the simple truth that had started it all. Sometimes the best journeys are the ones we never plan to take, and sometimes home is not a place we travel to but a life we build with the person who sees us truly and loves us completely.